What happens when a late-morning talk show built on laughter suddenly turns into a confessional chamber, and one of Hollywood's most guarded stars decides, without warning, to tell the whole truth. The lights are warm, the applause sign flashes on, and nobody in that studio knows they're about to witness a moment that will ripple far beyond the walls of daytime television. Before we step inside that moment, do one thing for me. Subscribe to Stage View, hit that like button, and drop a comment right now. Because stories like this don't just entertain, they linger. The band fades out, the familiar theme of The View dissolving into applause that rolls like a gentle wave across the studio. Joy Behar leans forward in her chair, cue cards resting lightly in her hand, her smile relaxed, practiced, safe. This is her arena. For decades, she's been the one asking the questions, poking, teasing, steering conversations with a wink and a punchline. Across from her sits Colin Farrell, shoulders slightly hunched, hands folded tighter than expected. He looks calm, too calm, like a man bracing for impact. Joy tilts her head, eyes sharp behind her glasses. "Colin," she says, half smiling, "you've played just about every kind of man imaginable. Heroes, villains, broken souls. But people still say you're one of Hollywood's great mysteries." The audience chuckles politely. Colin smiles back, but it doesn't quite reach his eyes. Inside him, something stirs. He hadn't planned this. He'd promised his publicist a light conversation, career, family, maybe a joke about aging in Hollywood. But the words great mysteries echo in his chest, knocking loose doors he usually keeps locked. He exhales slowly. "Yeah," he says, voice even. "Mystery's one way to put it." Joy senses it, the shift. She's been on television long enough to smell tension before it shows its face. She leans back, casual. "Well, let's solve one today," she jokes. "You've been very open lately about sobriety, fatherhood. Was there a moment where you realized you couldn't keep running from yourself?" The studio grows quieter. Cameras inch closer. Colin glances toward the audience, then back to Joy. For a split second, the confident actor disappears, replaced by a man standing alone with his past. "There wasn't one moment," he says softly. "It was 1,000 small ones. Waking up and not recognizing who I was becoming. Seeing my reflection and realizing I was playing a role I hated." A murmur ripples through the crowd. Joy nods, but her brow furrows. "That's heavy," she says. "But you turned it around. You're one of the success stories." Colin's jaw tightens. "That's the part people like," he replies. "The clean ending. The redemption arc." He pauses, eyes dropping to his hands. But real life doesn't wrap itself up so neatly. The audience leans in. One woman in the front row presses her fingers to her lips. Joy laughs lightly, trying to lift the mood. "Well, you're not in a movie here," she says. "You can give us the messy version." He looks up at her then, really looks at her, and something in his expression makes her smile fade. "Are you sure you want that? A beat. The kind of beat television producers dread." Joy hesitates, then nods. "We can handle it." Colin's voice lowers. "I don't think people understand how close I came to disappearing," he says. "Not metaphorically. Actually disappearing." A gasp escapes somewhere in the audience. One of the co-hosts shifts uncomfortably, eyes darting toward Joy. Joy's tone sharpens, protective but probing. "You mean emotionally?" "No," Colin says, shaking his head. "I mean I didn't care if I lived." Silence crashes down. Even the studio lights seem harsher now. Joy swallows. That's not something you've said before." "I know," he replies. "Because every time I tried, someone told me to make it funny. Or inspiring. Or short enough for a soundbite." He lets out a dry laugh. "But that's not how it felt. The audience is no longer just watching. They're witnessing." A man in the back wipes his eyes. A producer off-camera mouths something urgently. Joy straightens, defensive instincts kicking in. "Colin, we're a daytime show. People at home are human," he interrupts gently. Not angrily. Gently. Just like me. The interruption lands like a slap wrapped in velvet. Joy's lips part, then close. For once, she doesn't have a joke ready. He continues, momentum building now, words pouring out as if a dam has finally cracked. "There were nights I sat alone, sober or not, thinking, if this is it, if this is who I am forever, I don't want it. And nobody asks you about that part when you're famous. They ask about the accent, the hair, the scandals. Not the silence." Joy shifts in her seat, crossing and uncrossing her legs. "But you had everything," she says, the challenge creeping into her voice. "Money. Fame. A career people would kill for." Colin nods. That's exactly why it was so terrifying, he says. Because if having everything didn't save me, what would? The studio erupts into uneasy applause, short, scattered, unsure. Joy exhales, visibly shaken. I'm not trying to minimize what you went through, she says quickly. But when you say things like that on television, it affects people. You know that. He meets her gaze. So does pretending it doesn't exist. The tension between them hums, electric. Two worldviews colliding in real time. One built on keeping the show moving, the other on finally standing still. A co-host jumps in, voice trembling slightly. Colin, did you have support? Anyone who knew how bad it was. He smiles sadly. My kids, he says. They didn't know the details. But they knew when I wasn't present. And one day my son looked at me like he was already grieving someone who was still alive. His voice cracks. That broke me open. Joy's eyes glisten now. She looks away for a moment, adjusting her glasses. When she looks back, her voice is softer. I've lost people, she says. People who didn't make it through that darkness. A pause. I guess. I didn't expect this today. Neither did he. The audience rises into a standing ovation. Not loud, not wild, but deep and sustained. The kind that feels like an embrace. As the camera pulls back and the band begins to play, there's no neat resolution. Just a shared breath between strangers, and the unsettling sense that something important has been said out loud. And as the applause fades, you can feel it. This is only the beginning. The show cuts to commercial, but the moment doesn't end there. Backstage, whispers spread. Producers argue. Joy sits quietly, staring at her notes as if seeing them for the first time. Colin stands alone near the exit, wondering if he's just said too much or finally enough. The applause sign clicks off, but the air inside the studio stays thick, like smoke after an unseen fire. The band's final note echoes and dissolves, leaving behind a silence that feels louder than any crowd reaction. Cameras stop rolling, yet nobody moves right away. Crew members exchange glances that say, "Did that really just happen?" Colin Farrell stands near his chair, one hand resting on the back of it, grounding himself. His chest rises and falls slower now, but his eyes are distant, replaying words he hadn't rehearsed and emotions he hadn't planned to expose. Joy Behar removes her glasses, rubbing the bridge of her nose. This isn't how segments usually end. Normally there's banter, a joke tossed into the break, a reset. But today, the break feels like a fracture. A producer approaches Joy, whispering urgently. We didn't know he was going there. Joy nods, not looking up. Neither did he, she murmurs. Across the studio, Colin's publicist approaches him, voice low, controlled panic under every syllable. Colin, are you okay? That was intense. He gives a small nod. I'm okay, he says. I think. He glances toward Joy, who is now standing, speaking quietly with another host. Is she? The publicist hesitates. She's surprised. Colin exhales. Yeah, me too. When the red light flicks back on, something has shifted. The audience settles into their seats again, buzzing with nervous energy. People whisper to each other, phones itching in pockets, knowing they've just witnessed something that won't stay contained inside this room. Joy straightens her posture as the camera swings back to her. The professional mask slides on, but it doesn't fit as smoothly as before. We're back, she says, voice steady but not light. And we're still here with Colin Farrell. Applause rises, louder this time, edged with emotion. Colin nods in acknowledgement, but his smile is restrained. He's aware now, fully aware, that he's crossed an invisible line. There's no stepping back. Joy turns toward him. Colin, she begins, choosing each word carefully. What you shared before the break, it was raw. And I want to make sure we're being responsible here. He tilts his head slightly. Responsible to who? The question lands awkwardly. A few audience members shift in their seats. To people watching, Joy says. To those who might be struggling. You know how powerful words can be. He nods slowly. That's why I'm saying them. A ripple of reaction sweeps the crowd, soft applause, a few murmurs of agreement. Joy presses on. But don't you worry about glamorizing pain? About making despair sound poetic? Colin's expression tightens, not with anger, but with something closer to fatigue. Joy, he says, gently but firmly. There's nothing poetic about wanting to disappear. What is dangerous is silence. Because silence convinces people they're alone. The co-host beside Joy leans forward. But isn't there a risk, she asks, that people might hear your story and think, if even he felt that way, what hope is there for me? Colin looks at her, then out at the audience. His voice softens. Or they might think, if he survived it, maybe I can too. A woman in the audience nods vigorously, tears streaming down her face. Joy folds her hands together, tension visible in the tightness of her fingers. I hear you, she says. But television isn't therapy. No, Colin agrees. But it can be truth. That word, truth, hangs between them like a dare. Joy inhales sharply. You know, she says, a flash of edge returning. I've been doing this a long time. I've seen people come on this show and say shocking things because it gets attention. Colin doesn't flinch. That's fair, he says. But attention isn't what I'm after. If it were, I'd tell a scandalous story. Something sexy. Something funny. This. He gestures vaguely toward himself. This costs me more than it gives. The audience erupts into applause, louder now, more confident. Joy raises a hand, calming them. Her eyes search his face, looking for performance, for exaggeration. She doesn't find it. What she sees unsettles her. Why now? She asks quietly. Why today? He thinks for a moment. Because I'm tired of editing myself to make other people comfortable, he says. And because someone out there is sitting alone, watching this, thinking they're broken beyond repair. And they're not. Joy's voice drops. You don't know that. He meets her gaze. I know what it feels like to think you are. For a moment, the show forgets it's a show. The studio becomes a room full of people breathing the same heavy air. Joy swallows, emotion cracking through her composure. You know, she says, almost to herself, I've always believed humor is how you survive. Colin smiles faintly. It is, he says, until it becomes a shield you hide behind. The words sting. Joy shifts back in her chair, eyes narrowing, not in anger but recognition. So what are you saying? She asks. That we're doing it wrong? I'm saying we're doing what we know how to do, Colin replies. But sometimes what we know isn't enough. The audience reacts audibly now, some clapping, some gasping, some shaking their heads in disbelief. A producer's voice crackles faintly through Joy's earpiece. She listens, nods, then looks back at Colin. We're being told we need to move on, she says, half apologetic. But I don't feel right just pivoting. Colin chuckles softly. Neither do I. Joy sighs, a sound heavy with decades of experience and a sudden, unwelcome vulnerability. You've put us in a tough spot, she admits. He nods. I know, but maybe, she adds slowly, that's not such a bad thing. The audience applauds again, this time with relief mixed into the sound. Joy turns toward the camera. We're going to take another short break, she says. And when we come back, we'll continue this conversation with care. As the cameras cut away, the studio buzz explodes. Crew members rush, voices overlapping. Social media producers stare at their screens, eyes wide. Twitter's on fire, someone whispers. Backstage, Colin leans against a wall, eyes closed. For the first time, doubt creeps in. Did I hijack something that wasn't mine? He wonders. Did I hurt more than I helped? Joy steps off set and approaches him. There's no audience now, no cameras. Just two people standing in the aftermath. That was a lot, she says. He nods. I'm sorry if I crossed a line. She studies him for a long moment. I don't know if there was a line, she says finally. Or if we just pretend there is so we don't have to look too closely. He lets out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. You shook me, Joy admits. And I don't like being shaken. He offers a small, apologetic smile. Neither do I. But sometimes it's the only way things move. She shakes her head, half smiling now. You actors, she mutters. Always so dramatic. Guilty, he replies. A stagehand calls out that they're back in 30 seconds. Joy straightens her jacket. Whatever happens next, she says, just know you started something today. He meets her eyes. So did you. As they walk back toward the set together, the audience senses it. This isn't just an interview anymore. It's a reckoning unfolding in real time. And outside the studio walls, phones are lighting up, clips are being shared, and a single question begins to spread across the internet like wildfire. Did Colin Farrell just change daytime television forever? When the cameras come back on, the studio feels smaller, like the walls have crept inward while no one was looking. The audience settles again, but this time there's a different kind of silence. Anticipatory, charged, almost reverent. People aren't just waiting to be entertained anymore. They're waiting to see who will blink first. Joy Behar sits a little straighter than before, chin lifted, shoulders squared. She's composed herself, but something in her eyes has changed. The humor is still there, buried deep, but now it's sharing space with something far less familiar, uncertainty. Colin Farrell takes his seat across from her, hands resting loosely on his knees. He looks calmer than he did before the break, as if the worst of the storm has already passed through him. Or maybe he's just accepted that there's no shelter left. Joy looks into the camera first, grounding herself in routine. Before the break, she says, "We were talking about honesty and what responsibility comes with it, especially when you have a platform." She turns back to Colin. "I want to push you a little," she adds. "Not to challenge your pain, but to understand it." He nods. "That's fair." She leans in. "You talked about wanting to disappear. You talked about silence. But there are people who say, not everyone has the luxury to fall apart. That some people have to keep going no matter how dark it gets." A murmur moves through the audience. This is the question people at home are thinking but wouldn't dare say out loud. Colin considers it carefully. "They're right," he says. "A lot of people don't get to stop. They have jobs, kids, bills. And that pressure," he taps his chest lightly, "it doesn't make the darkness go away. It just teaches you how to hide it better." Joy's voice sharpens. "But isn't that just life?" she asks. "You endure. You survive." "Yes," Colin says. "But surviving isn't the same as living." The audience reacts audibly, some applause, some uneasy shifting. Joy crosses her arms, a defensive reflex she doesn't even notice she's making. "I grew up in a time where you didn't talk about these things," she says. "You made jokes. You moved on. You didn't sit in your pain." Colin nods slowly. "I know," he says. "And that strength got a lot of people through impossible circumstances." He pauses. "But it also buried a lot of them." The words hit hard. A woman in the second row breaks down, covering her face. The camera catches it for a split second before cutting away. Joy exhales sharply. "You're saying my generation got it wrong." "I'm saying every generation does the best it can with what it has," Colin replies. And then the next one asks harder questions. Joy lets out a short, humorless laugh. "Well, congratulations," she says. "You're asking them on my show." The audience chuckles nervously. She tilts her head. "Do you ever worry," she asks, "that being this open will come back to haunt you? That Hollywood will punish you for not being shiny?" Colin smiles faintly. "Hollywood's punished me for worse," he says. "For drinking too much. For being reckless. For being human in public." His smile fades. "If honesty costs me work, I can live with that. I couldn't live with lying anymore." A heavy beat settles over the room. One of the co-hosts speaks up, voice trembling slightly. "What do you say to the people who look up to you?" she asks. "The ones who see you as strong." Colin turns to her. "I tell them strength isn't pretending you're fine," he says. "It's asking for help before it's too late." The audience applauds, longer now, louder, more unified. Joy looks down at her cards, then sets them aside. "I had a friend," she says suddenly. Her voice wavers just enough for everyone to notice. "A comedian. Always the funniest person in the room." She swallows. "He didn't make it. And I still wonder if we laughed too loud instead of listening." The studio freezes. This is no longer about Colin. He leans forward slightly. "I'm sorry," he says softly. Joy nods, eyes glistening. "That's why this scares me," she admits. "Because once you open this door, you can't control who walks through it." Colin meets her vulnerability with his own. "You're right," he says. "But the door's already open. People are hurting whether we talk about it or not." A producer off-camera shifts, visibly anxious. This isn't safe territory. This isn't predictable. Joy straightens, reclaiming a bit of control. "You know, people are already reacting," she says. "Social media is exploding. Some are praising you. Others say this isn't appropriate for daytime television." Colin shrugs slightly. "Pain doesn't check the clock," he says. "It doesn't care if it's daytime or prime time." A wave of applause crashes through the studio, louder than anything before. Joy can't help but smile, small, reluctant, but real. "You're good," she says. "Too good." He chuckles. "I've had a lot of practice arguing with myself." She studies him for a moment, then nods. "I'm going to ask you something, and I want an honest answer." "Okay. Do you think this conversation helps more people than it hurts?" He doesn't answer right away. He looks out at the audience, faces wet with tears, eyes locked on him, people nodding, shaking, breathing together. He looks back at Joy. "Yes," he says quietly. "I do." Joy leans back in her chair. For a long moment, she says nothing. Then she exhales, the tension draining just a little. "Then I guess," she says, "we'll have to live with the discomfort." The audience rises in another standing ovation. This one is different. It's not just support, it's gratitude. As the show begins to wrap, Joy turns toward the camera. When we come back, she says, we'll talk about what happens next. The words sound innocent. They're anything but. Because outside that studio, the conversation has already escaped. Clips are trending. Headlines are being drafted. Opinions are hardening into sides. And inside, two people sit across from each other, knowing they've crossed a point of no return. The show ends the way it always does. Theme music swelling, applause washing over the set, cameras pulling back. But nothing about this ending feels familiar. The audience stands, not because the sign tells them to, but because they don't quite know how else to release what they're feeling. Some clap through tears. Some just stand there, hands pressed together, as if they've witnessed something sacred and fragile. Joy Behar smiles into the camera, professional to the last second. But when the red light goes off, her shoulders drop. The smile disappears. She exhales like someone who's been holding their breath for years. Colin Farrell rises from his chair slowly. There's no victory in his posture, no sense of triumph. Only relief mixed with a quiet dread. The kind that comes after telling the truth when you know the truth doesn't belong to you anymore. As the audience files out, people stop him. A woman grips his arm, eyes red. "Thank you," she whispers. A man nods silently, unable to speak. Colin listens, nods back, absorbs it all. Every reaction feels heavier than applause. Backstage, the atmosphere is tense. Producers cluster around monitors, scrolling furiously. One of them looks up, eyes wide. "We're trending. Everywhere." Joy hears it and shakes her head slowly. "Of course we are." A younger staffer reads headlines out loud, half disbelieving. Colin Farrell's confession leaves the view in shock. Joy Behar visibly shaken by unexpected on-air moment. Daytime TV crosses a line, or finally tells the truth? Joy closes her eyes briefly. She's been in media long enough to know what comes next. Praise. Outrage. Think pieces. The machinery will chew this moment up and spit out simplified versions that fit neatly into headlines. Colin stands near the edge of the room, listening, feeling strangely detached. He said what he needed to say. Whatever happens now is out of his control. Joy walks over to him. There's no audience, no cameras, just two people standing in the quiet aftermath. "Well," she says dryly, "you definitely woke the internet up." He gives a tired smile. "Sorry about that." She studies him, then sighs. "Don't apologize," she says. "I'm just processing." He nods. "Me too." There's an awkward pause, then Joy speaks again, softer this time. "You know, I've spent my life believing that keeping things light was a kindness." Colin listens, not interrupting. "And maybe it was," she continues. "For a long time." She looks up at him. "But today you made me realize something. Sometimes humor keeps people alive. And sometimes it keeps them hidden." He swallows. "I never meant to put that on you." "I know," she says. "That's why it landed." Across the country and far beyond it, the moment detonates. Clips spread like wildfire. TikTok fills with reactions. People crying into their phones, people arguing, people thanking a man they've never met for saying out loud what they've been too afraid to admit. Twitter fractures into camps. Some call it brave. Others call it irresponsible. A few demand apologies, from Colin, from Joy, from the show itself. Mental health advocates weigh in, praising the raw honesty. Critics accuse the show of exploiting vulnerability. Media pundits argue on panels that look eerily like the one Colin just sat on, only colder, more rehearsed. Joy watches some of it that night from her living room, glasses perched low on her nose. She switches the TV off after 10 minutes. Colin sits in a hotel room, lights dim, phone face down on the table. For the first time in years, he doesn't feel the urge to numb himself from the noise. He lets it exist, lets the discomfort breathe. Messages come in anyway. Fellow actors, old friends, strangers. One text stands out, simple and devastating in its honesty. "I watched today. I didn't feel alone for the first time in months." He closes his eyes. The next morning, The View releases a statement, carefully worded, balanced, cautious. It speaks of important conversations and viewer responsibility. It neither apologizes nor celebrates. Joy reads it and feels oddly unsatisfied. When she returns to the show days later, the audience applause is louder than usual. But she notices the faces. They're watching her differently now, listening for what's beneath the jokes. She opens the show with humor, as always, but there's a pause, just a beat longer than normal, before the laughter. In that space, something new exists. Colin, meanwhile, is asked about the moment in every interview that follows. He answers simply, I told the truth. Some doors close quietly. A project moves in another direction. A meeting is postponed indefinitely. He expected that. Other doors open. Conversations he never thought he'd have. Invitations to speak, not as a movie star, but as a human being who survived himself. Weeks later, a clip resurfaces again. This time not as controversy, but as comfort. Shared late at night. Sent between friends. Saved by people who need to hear it more than once. Joy receives a letter. Handwritten. No return address. It thanks her, not for the jokes, but for not shutting the conversation down when it got uncomfortable. She folds it carefully and puts it in a drawer. That's the part no one predicted. Not the outrage. Not the praise. But the quiet shift afterward. The way people start listening differently. The way silence becomes harder to justify. Nothing exploded. No one was canceled. No dramatic resolution tied it all up. But something changed. And maybe that's how real moments always work. Not with a bang, but with a crack that lets the light in. Now, this is where you come in. What do you think? Did Colin Farrell cross a line, or did he say what needed to be said? Was Joy Behar right to feel shaken, or was that discomfort the point? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's talk about it, honestly. And if you want more cinematic, intense, behind-the-scenes stories like this, subscribe to Stage View right now. Like this video, share it with someone who needs it, and stay with us, because the most powerful moments are the ones that refuse to stay quiet.